Welcome back, everybody. Hot mic off and rolling here on this Monday. This is a look at the teams to move up to the FCS over the last 3 years. West Georgia, Mercyhurst, New Haven, Rio Grande Valley, Chicago State begins football this fall, and we've got another one moving to the FCS ranks. We found out late last week the University of West Florida made it official that the Argonauts are moving up from Division II to begin FCS play this fall, which seems like a perfect segue for our guy Sam Herder back after a week off. I had heard the news was percolating. All right, here we go. Perfect for Sam to tee us off on a Monday. It's great to see you, bud. This is not surprising. I think we've heard about West Florida for a little bit. They are now officially, or come July 1, officially an FCS member.
Yeah, we've heard West Florida for a while now, as far as a potential team to move up from D2 to the FCS. And, finally it's happening with them joining the UAC. I think it's or at least the UAC for football, ASUN for its other sports. But I think it's a really good addition for the UAC, who, I think needed some members, especially after the Utah schools left for the Big Sky. Tarleton's kind of always floating out there as a possible team to move up to the FBS. So the UAC has been looking for some members. I think they were targeting like SEMO and UT Martin for a little bit, and that didn't work out. So I think them grabbing West Florida out of the D2 ranks it is a good addition. And I think I tweeted it out. There have been some recent D2 to FCS moves that don't really move the needle a whole lot. You don't really expect those teams to make much noise at the FCS level. It was more so just some Eastern conferences kind of needing to add some members. But West Florida, I think, has big time potential because they have had a lot of success at the D2 level. They have a growing enrollment as a university. They're investing and they're upgrading, renovating their stadium. So I do think this is an exciting addition for the FCS.
And this is a team that's been really good in Division II, won a national champion. They're not even that old of a program, but they won a national championship a few years ago. They were in the same league that West Georgia came from in the Gulf South. That's a really good football conference that they think they can come in and automatically they got a rivalry again with UWG back.
And West Georgia made a decent amount of noise this year. Yes. They were, I think, undefeated for a little bit. They were playoff ineligible. But I think on this show we talked about, hey, if West Georgia was playoff eligible, how much noise could they make? And now you have West Florida joining the mix as well. And they're a young program, like you said. Their first season playing football was 2016. And then the very next year, 2017, they make the D2 national championship, end up losing. But then in 2019, they win the national championship. So they've seen, like I said, success at the D2 level. Now we have seen some teams that have had D2 national success move up to the FCS and haven't had, quite that level of success, like North Alabama, Texas A&M Commerce. I think they won a D2 national title somewhat recently. Then they moved up to the FCS. That's now East Texas A&M. They haven't necessarily moved the needle a whole lot, but there have been some like West Georgia, Tarleton State that have moved up from D2 to FCS that have seen success pretty quickly. Yeah. And I feel like West Florida is going to be in that mix as well, as far as teams that can find success pretty early on.
I just have a sense that they have supported it, that they are primed to be good. I just think they're going to have a seamless transition. I do, to the FCS level.
Yeah, and I don't know much about their other sports, but it seems this is a football move.
Yes.
Whereas some other schools that move to D1, it's more of a basketball move. And they have football as well, and then their football team, isn't funded like it has to be to compete at the D1 level. So it seems like football is kind of their athletic department's crown jewel. Like that's what they put the most stock in. And so you expect them to do the things necessary to compete at the D1 level.
Of those teams, we talked plenty on UTRGV last year. I think they are the ones primed for the most success. West Georgia's in there, but I put West Florida in that mix now too. Whenever 3 years they get eligible, that those are the teams now. For fans who are going to follow the division, we're going to see, I think, in a routine in the top 25 and likely in the playoff bracket.
Yeah, and we've been, with Jacksonville State and Kennesaw, Sam Houston, teams like that moving up, you can go back further to some of the SoCon powers. We've been kind of waiting and asking for some teams from different areas to step up. And, Tarleton State seems to be getting there. Yeah. And you mentioned UTRGV. They are playoff eligible right away because they were technically already D1. They just added a football program. Right. And honestly, I think they were maybe good enough to make the playoffs last year. It's just with their very first year playing football, they scheduled like 3 or 4 non-D1 opponents. Had they not done that, maybe they could have made the playoffs, but they probably didn't realize it at the time. But that's another program that's in a really good area. They don't have much FBS competition way down in southern Texas. So that's another one that I'm keeping an eye on. And we mentioned too with West Georgia, I think they have really good potential as well.
Well, we've been clamoring for somebody in the South to get good, right? We know the teams, and you're doing your podcast with Brad Jones about the teams in this part of the world. We need somebody down south, like when we lost Georgia Southern, we lost App State, we lost Coastal Carolina, we lost Jacksonville State, lost James Madison. We need somebody in that part of the country to be good. Yeah,
exactly. And I think a part of that is realignment, just with all the dominoes that fall in realignment. It seems it's usually the southeast portion of the country that we've seen a lot of teams move up just because that's where a lot of the FBS conferences are. So that has hurt the FCS as far as the realignment. But I also think it's just NDSU setting the bar so high and what you need to do to win a national championship, whether it be facilities or nutrition, how you're investing in strength and conditioning, paying your coaches so you can retain them. Now you have to get money into the pockets of players, whether it's Alston or cost of attendance, now revenue sharing. So winning a national title at the FCS level, it looks a lot different now compared to the early 2010s into the 2000s. And so whenever you see a team from the South that is at least investing at a high level, it kind of perks your ears up a little bit as far as, saying, okay, they're doing the right things necessary to compete at a high level. They just need to keep on stacking that up and try to reach that really high bar that, frankly, the bar that NDSU sets. Montana State has met that bar. South Dakota State has met that bar. Montana is pushing to try to meet that bar, and there's some other teams pushing to meet that bar, but it's such a high bar right now that some of these southern schools are kind of looking at that bar going, we'll try, but I don't know if we can quite get to that level.
The FCS kickoff is dead. I would say it died probably the year after the Bison played Charleston Southern here at the Fargo Dome. You and I have talked about this a bit, but now it's official. Is this more the fact that the FCS is getting the earlier start, that the kickoff is now irrelevant?
Yeah, I think that is a part of it where, and I can't remember what the TV numbers are. I mean, they were fine, but it was great. It was once it moved to the neutral site, the crowds just weren't there. I mean, it's one of the very first games that you see on national TV, if not the very first game you see on national TV. And when they do that early shot pan over the crowd and it's 30% full, it doesn't really get the juices flowing. And so I think once it moved away from the home sites, it just really lost its luster. And I've been opining for a while that they need to move it back to neutral sites. But I think now move it back to home sites. I think now with the FCS fully moving into week 0, and it seems like the FBS is fully moving into week 0 soon enough. And we talked about that, like that's going to happen eventually. I just think that whole, like the FCS spotlight to itself isn't really a thing anymore. So it kind of made sense that the kickoff just kind of, slowly went away.
Well, from the reporting we've had and we've seen, it looks like the FCS is going to have week 1 to itself this year. And then next year, looks like FBS is moving to that last week in August as well to start its season.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting if the FBS, if they can also, once they move into week 0, which will be the new week one, if they can also start their season that Thursday.
Right.
Because the FCS, they can not only start that Saturday before everyone else, but they could start Thursday and Friday. So there's a lot of TV windows there, which I'm sure the FBS and the Power 4 will gobble up, in no time once they start in week 4. And I also think it has to do with the CFP, kind of just moving the whole season back a little bit, just so the championship game isn't being played so late. And then how does that move into the FCS playoffs and TV windows there? It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
I also think, we've talked about this, the NFL is poised to move on to Labor Day. That's why I think the college season wants to get off Labor Day, because next year in 2027, the NFL could go to 18 games, and they're going to start Labor Day weekend, which traditionally has been the start of the college football season.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of like a trickle-down effect of, the NFL, what they do, and then the FBS kind of reacts to that, and then the FCS has to react to that. So, the TV windows are just so interesting on how just things move around a little bit and all the moving parts when it comes to those TV windows.
All right, we're going to give you a new nickname around here with Hot Take Herder. A couple weeks ago, you had Idaho State. Now you're all over Austin Peay. What's the deal with the Governors? Why do you think they have a chance to be pretty good in 2026?
Yeah, I think anytime you start with, having your starting quarterback coming back, and Austin Peay has that, and Chris Parson, who I think is really flying under the radar because Bo Brungard will take a lot of headlines,
Yes.
and so will the two quarterbacks from Montana and Lamson and Ayat. Have Chase Mason, DJ Williams, a lot of guys from the Valley as well. But I think Chris Parson is up there as far as being a top tier quarterback in the FCS. He's coming back after transferring to Austin Peay from the FBS level. And they were very, very close to making the playoffs last year. They went into overtime with Tarleton State. Had they won that game, they would have finished 8-4, which would have included that win over Tarleton State, plus a dominating win over, it was Middle Tennessee State. It was like 34-14, something like that. So, and actually in overtime, they were a 2-point conversion away. They had a wide open receiver, and Parson, who was excellent that game, just airmailed it, and they missed out on a win there. So I think they'll be 1 year better, get into the playoffs. I'm not saying they're a national title threat or anything like that, but I think they're one of the teams that did not make the postseason last year that I could see in the 2014 bracket this upcoming year.
And they were supposed to play North Dakota State this year. They were supposed to come up here and play the Bison in Fargo, and obviously that's not going to happen. I believe they have Vandy as their FBS game, which will be a struggle, certainly, but I remember watching last year and fully anticipating we were going to see them here at the Dome this fall, and obviously that's not going to be the case, but they've got some talent. Be intrigued to see how good they are this coming fall.
Yeah, they do a pretty good job in the portal as well, grabbing some, like I said, Parson, he came from the FBS level. So they do a pretty good job attacking the portal. Retention, is decent for them, but they're in a really good area as well. They don't draw huge crowds just because they don't have a good stadium, but they do, have a good town, as far as a town that kind of rallies around the football program. So I think Austin Peay is primed for a really good year this year.
All right, you just keep firing them off here on a Monday for. Okay, we got Idaho State, we got Austin Peay. We're going to mark it down for this upcoming fall. All right.
All right, that sounds good. I'll have to, do some research and find another team to talk about next week. That's a little off the radar.
Let's do it. Sam, thanks for doing this, bud. We'll talk to you next week, all right?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday to get our week started. Austin Peay, again, that's one of those ones we'll never know. They were supposed to come to Fargo this fall, but obviously that will not be happening with the Bison making the move to the Mountain West Conference. And I know we got plenty out there saying, I'm done with FCS. I'm not willing to break up yet. I think we have too many of our viewers and listeners that are intrigued to see what's going to happen. And frankly, I think there's a lot of Bison fans in denial. They're not going to want to see what's going on with the Jackrabbits, with UND, with Montana State this upcoming fall. We're fully going to have our eyes fixated on the Mountain West, and rightfully so. We need to, and everything else that's going on in FBS, but I think there are too many that are in denial that aren't going to be keeping an eye on what's happening with specifically those three schools I just mentioned. Let's break. We come back. We'll wrap up our first hour. Jeff Kopak coming up in hour two. We'll look ahead to tonight's national championship game and much more as we roll on a Monday morning edition of Hot Mike on WDAY Extra right after this.